Hi, and welcome to another edition of This Week in Plymouth. I am your host and your town manager, Derek Brindisi. This afternoon, I have with me Mr. Steve Bolotin, who is here to talk about the charter. Welcome, Steve.
Hi, Derek. Thanks very much for having me.
Steve, I know you do a lot of things in the community. You serve in the planning board, other boards and committees, but this was a short stint, about a year in the making, I think?
Yeah, we're coming up on a year and 4 months now, but really one full year of meetings and deliberations and discussions for the Charter Review Committee.
For the Charter Review Committee, which was appointed by the moderator. So just to go back in history a little bit, about a year ago, the moderator appointed the Charter Review Committee, which is 9 members. You served as the vice chair, Alan Costello served as the chair, and that came on the heels of the charter that was developed by the Charter Commission, which was an elected body, that their charter went to the ballot back in May, I believe. Was it last year?
2 years ago now.
2 years ago, May. And that charter was defeated. So I remember the moderator making a public statement that depending on the vote, the will of the people during that charter revision, he would then go ahead and appoint a charter committee to go ahead and review the charter. So here we are. We're coming up on town meeting, October 19th. Just a few days away from the recording of this presentation. And so, Steve, I wanted to talk to you specifically about the charter. There's been a lot of misinformation out there as we head into town meeting, which isn't uncommon. We typically see that, especially on social media. And so this is a really good opportunity for you as the vice chair of the Charter Committee to talk about the changes that are being proposed in the charter. But before we get into the changes, for the folks that are at home and they don't really understand what is a charter, what's the intention of a charter, could you kind of give us a little bit of background on that?
Sure. So not every town has a charter.
Right.
Plymouth is one of the ones that does. We've had one for quite some time, hundreds of years really. And it's essentially the Constitution of Plymouth. Mm-hmm. So the intent of a charter is to serve as this overarching document. It explains the functions of various people and their roles in town government. That's the purpose. So we set forth our form of town government, our framework, who does what and how they get there.
Mm-hmm. Great. Right, and so you're right. So there are a lot of communities that don't. I served 5 years as the town manager in Upton. They didn't have a charter. I served 15 years for the city of Worcester, and they had a charter. They had a quite robust charter, as you can imagine. So, Plymouth is more aligned with Worcester in having its charter. So, I've been here about 2.5 years now, and there's been a lot of discussion about the change in the form of government. So right now we have a town manager select board with a representative town meeting form of government. One of the pieces of information that's been thrown out there is that this charter is changing the form of government. How do you respond to that?
Absolutely not. First of all, this isn't a change. All this is a series of recommendations to town meeting. Mm-hmm. So I'm here speaking on behalf of the Charter Review Committee. So I will just be able to explain what the committee's position was on as a majority vote for any one of these items. Others are out there giving their personal opinions. It's not my role, as far as I'm concerned, as the vice chair I speak on behalf of the committee. But I can say that the committee did not make any recommendations to the change in the role or responsibility of the select board, the planning board, town meeting, and for the most part, yourself as town manager. The only thing we did do is we made you take on a little bit more work, is that we're recommending that the town manager be responsible for the creation of we've variously referred to it as an operations manual or a handbook for the residents explaining how town government works in reasonable detail, so that rather than having to rely on people going to these legal documents like our charter and our bylaws, there is a clear English language and translatable language explanation for people looking to understand how they do things here in town government.
That's really important. So a couple of things that you just said. So one, you gave me more homework. I appreciate that. But creating a handbook so all of our 65,000 residents understand the type of government, the form of government we have, and how we deliver those critical services, I think is really important. So again, I've worked for 3 different forms of government. most people, when you ask them about, even if they understand how government works, most people will say that there's either a mayor form of government or a town meeting form of government. That's quite frankly not true, but it just speaks to the fact that the vast majority of the general public are misinformed as to the various types of forms of government that are out there. And I think your handbook gets at some of that in describing that. And so, just so I want to recap, we still have a select board, a 5-member select board.
Absolutely.
We still have a town manager.
Yes.
We still have a school committee.
Yes.
Still have a planning board.
Yes.
And those are the 4 major functions of government. And then we still have a representative town meeting.
Yes.
162 members, 18 precincts, none of that's changed.
Correct.
I just wanted you to say that because I know that's correct, but I know that that's misinformation that speaks otherwise. So there's approximately, I think, 11 articles
Right.
that we're going to ask town meeting members to review and deliberate and discuss on. Probably don't have time to go through all 11 of them, but I wanted to focus on some of the big ones that we're going to discuss on Saturday. You already touched upon, which is Article 24, is relative to Chapter 5, Time Administration. You already discussed the fact that a handbook is being proposed to be created, again, for more transparency, more efficiency purposes. But there's another big component in that one that I wanted to bring to the folks' attention is there's some language in there that speaks specifically to 3 different departments: Finance Department, the Planning Department, and the Department of Public Works. And your committee is proposing to remove that, not eliminate those departments, so let's be clear what's being proposed, but just to remove the language that references those departments out of the charter.
Absolutely. And I'll give you the clear explanation as to why. In our charter, our current charter as it sits today, there is language that states that the town manager, with the approval of the select board, may create, consolidate, or eliminate any department.
Right.
That's in our current charter. There are some people out there who are saying, oh, because in the document it appears in blue, this is new language. No, it appears in blue because we moved it from one section to another.
Sure.
Our current charter has responsibilities scattered throughout the document. In fact, the town manager's responsibilities are listed in 4 separate chapters. That's why we tried to consolidate that, again, for clarity and transparency purposes. But in having a provision that says you may eliminate a department, if you then list that department in the charter, then it becomes required that it exist.
Right.
And which provision takes precedence is unclear. Any legal document, and the charter is a legal document, it is law for town.
That's right.
Any legal document which creates conflict or confusion is not a well-drafted document. So we essentially said, do we want to have a charter that requires certain departments to exist, or do we want the town to have the flexibility to change that? And one of the examples that was used was the finance department. What happens if 10 years from now, the town says, you know, we've grown so large, our finance functions are so diverse, we really want to break the finance department up into 3 different positions. Maybe we have a chief financial officer, a treasurer, a comptroller, other positions. Well, we wouldn't be able to do that if the finance department is listed and the finance director are listed in the charter. And the problem with changing our charter is it's special legislation. It has to go to the State House. The legislature has to review it, approve it, and then get back to us. That, even on an administrative matter, has taken between 18 and 24 months to have happen.
That's right.
So one of the things that we are recommending in many instances is to move language from the charter to a bylaw in the town. Because bylaws are addressed by town meeting. We can address a bylaw at any town meeting, and if there's an emergency that's created, COVID, if nothing else, has taught us the need to be flexible is paramount in town government. We could call a special town meeting and have town meeting address a bylaw change then. So again, some of these things are in our charter because we've thought that that's the place to put them. rather than put them in our bylaws or our regulations, which are a lot more flexible for the town. And again, you put it in the bylaws, it's the same protections that you have. It still has to go to town meeting, it still goes before the Advisory and Finance Committee, it goes to town meeting, and they make the determination.
I mean, that is a great point, and you just mentioned the finance department. So if you open the section that references the finance department, it speaks to all the different divisions within the finance department, like you mentioned, the treasurer collector's office, the assessor's office. Well, it also mentions the data processing unit. We don't have a data, just so folks are clear, we are already in violation of the charter because we don't have a data processing unit. So, to your point, the charter doesn't give us the flexibility to allow government to evolve with the changing times and the needs of the community. And so therefore, if this charter went to pass, we then should go to town meeting in April and ask town meeting to fund a data processing unit. Although we don't need it, it's required in the charter.
It is that issue. People have, for better or worse, for whatever reasons, over the last, I can't say it's 20 years, 30 years, 40 years even, started to treat our charter as the town operations manual.
Right.
And that's not its purpose. We're supposed to have greater flexibility in certain things by putting them in bylaws, regulations, or simply left to the discretion of the elected town officials. And those are, again, your select board, your planning board, your town meeting members, and obviously your town moderator is townwide elected, as well as 2 other bodies.
Yeah, no, it makes a lot of sense. So, you know, when I look at a lot of the changes, to me, it makes government more efficient. It takes out redundancies. I had a chance to review the existing charter, and to your point, you look at the town manager's responsibilities, they are scattered throughout the document. One of the claims that are out there is that, it's an interesting claim, that this document proposes the removal of the executive branch. Can you speak to that? Because that's a confusing claim.
What this document proposes is to remove the heading executive branch.
Okay.
And instead identifies town-wide elected offices and bodies. The reason that came about was there was a lot of input from residents at various times, some directly to the Charter Review Committee itself, some to the individual members at various events. And all of the Charter Review Committee members are involved in other committees. They're very active throughout the town, whether that's town meeting or myself on planning board and master plan, others on COPC. We have Dave Golden was COPC and then became select board before he resigned from the committee. Others who are on other committees, CPC, the list goes on. We had FinCom members, all people heard variably around the town certain issues that they had. One of the regular issues that we kept hearing from residents was, I don't understand this form of government.
Right.
It's a problem. Now, the charter is not the place that you should go to understand the form of government. It is a legal document, and it is a difficult document to read. Again, it's not something that is going to just lightly trip off the tongue. This is not bedtime reading for anybody.
Right.
But at
Unless you want to go to sleep.
Unless you do want to go to sleep. But it can be made clearer. And one of the things that the Charter Review Committee focused on was trying to make the way town government functions clearer to the residents. I've heard a number of people at recent caucuses say, well, the charter should be written for town meeting members. The Charter Review Committee didn't agree with that. I have no problem believing that town meeting members will understand the charter in whatever form it is put forth to them. They will get it. The people who don't get it are the residents.
Right.
If you pick up our charter right now, you wouldn't know, unless you delve through deeply, that we have a townwide elected moderator. And that's not something that anybody else has.
Right.
That's very unique to Plymouth.
Good point.
They don't know that. We actually have a section in our current charter that lists townwide elected officials. And strangely, the moderator is not included in that list. So what we said was, look, if someone wants to understand town government, how are they going to understand it? With the idea that particularly we want people to vote. How are they going to understand who they're voting for? We said, okay, let us create a charter that mimics the ballot that they see. Top of the ballot, what do they see? They see the town-wide elected officials that everyone in town votes on. And we said, okay, let's create that. And rather than discuss executive function, et cetera, let's just identify who the town-wide elected officials are. That way, anyone who picks up that document will immediately look and go, okay, I know who these people are and why they're appearing on my ballot. Next, we looked at, okay, who is it that everyone in town votes for, but not necessarily the same person or persons? That's town meeting. Everybody in town is in a precinct. They vote for their representative town meeting members, but obviously you vote for different people depending on where you are. So we put that there. I have heard, again, people say, well, you've put the executive in front of the legislative,
Right,
and
that's
that's
the other.
changing the form of government, or you're enhancing one over the other. No, it is purely an organizational structure. No one has any intent of changing how either of those branches of government work. But that's what we did. We then created a separate body, a separate chapter addressing town administration. Why? Because if people want to understand how the town is administered, as opposed to who is making our executive and legislative decisions, they should know who that is, which is you.
Right.
We then separately went on to create chapters addressing those bodies that the town is required by state law to have, and then those bodies that the town is not required to have, but by charter has said are important enough that we want them to be permanent. Those are your standing committees, things like your committee of precinct chairs, your open space committee, your land use and acquisition committee, actually, ironically, your zoning board of appeals and your board of health.
So then that being said, because you just touched on it, that we're not eliminating the executive branch, although that's a claim that's being made. In fact, I know that early on in the document itself, it actually, one of the opening paragraphs speaks to the form of government and still says town meeting, select board, town manager, form of government. So the legislative branch is town meeting.
Yes.
The executive branch is select board. And if we haven't removed those two bodies from the charter, then they still exist.
Correct. And town manager is the administrative side of government. And we've had that argument. So, for example, we have some debates over where certain people go. We have a proposal to move the town moderator back to the legislative branch, saying they should be there. But Plymouth eliminated the town moderator as a solely legislative role many years ago by giving the town moderator appointing authority over bodies that are not part of the legislative branch, such as the Advisory and Finance Committee and the Charter Review Committee. And we made the town moderator not appointed by our legislature, but rather elected by the public.
Right.
And for that reason, the proposal was to move the town moderator along with the list, which again exists in our current charter, of town-wide elected officials, because the moderator is a town-wide elected official.
Right, he is. That's right. And I remember the Charter Review Commission's recommendation was to allow town meeting members to elect the moderator. I think every 2 years is what they proposed. And so your proposal through the Charter Review Committee is to maintain the existing structure that the moderator is elected by the people and serves for the people. A couple things have come up with the moderator. Your committee is proposing some changes in his authority?
Yes. So right now, the Advisory and Finance Committee is appointed solely by the moderator. It's not done in a public process, and it's not done with any advertising to the public. Now, from a process standpoint only, I want to make clear, because people say, oh, this is an attack on Mr. Trifletti, our moderator. No, it is not. No one is saying that appointments to the Advisory and Finance Committee have been bad or that things have been done inappropriately. Not being said at all. It was never a discussion as part of the Charter Review Committee. We looked at this from a process standpoint. We said as a committee that we were going to favor transparency whenever possible. That was something the residents have regularly said. Every person who has run for townwide elected office has at one time or another said, I favor more transparency. I was able to look throughout our Charter Review Committee and I could actually point out when most of those people said that, myself included.
Sure.
So we felt that an appointment to a body as important as the Advisory and Finance Committee could not be done in a non-transparent way. The reasoning behind the choice as it's done now is sound. There's nothing nefarious about it. And there's legitimate reasons for it. But from a committee standpoint, from a process standpoint, we could not agree that it should be done in secret. That's just not appropriate. So we said, fine. First, it needs to be a public process. And in full disclosure again, the Advisory and Finance Committee, when we presented that to them, agreed. They agreed that this should be a public process.
Right.
What the Advisory and Finance Committee and some others have objected to is whom we have said should be doing the appointment. Because the next problem that we faced as a committee looking forward is we should never have one person be responsible for making appointments, not a single person. What if that person has a conflict? Everybody has conflicts, whether that's a conflict, I'm being sued by my neighbor and my neighbor applies for that position. That's a conflict.
Right.
I have a business. Someone else is a business competitor. They're applying for a position. That's a conflict.
Sure.
If you have a conflict, and human beings have conflicts, it's not anything wrong. It just happens. We don't have a backup in our charter. There is no way. There is no way right now. If our current moderator has a conflict with someone who has applied for the position and should not be making that determination, there is no backup. So if you have the assistant town moderator do it, well then, first of all, you would have someone who is appointed making appointments, which again, we typically do not do. We ask that elected officials make appointments. And then you would still have a single person who could also have a conflict.
Right.
So that's why appointments tend to be made by committees. So we thought we would create a committee. The committee would consist of first the moderator, who would serve as the chair, not removing the moderator from the process at all. To the contrary, we're making sure the moderator remained the chair rather than leave it to the committee to decide. Moderator is the chair. There would then be appointees coming from the Select Board, the Planning Board, the COPC, and the School Committee. Those are the 4 other major town-wide elected bodies.
Right. Right.
Those are your elected officials.
Yep. Makes sense.
Now, a legitimate issue was raised, and I want to be clear because I don't want to say that we dismissed this. A legitimate issue was raised that those other bodies, with the exception of the COPC, present articles to town meeting. And if they are appointing people on the Advisory and Finance Committee, then they may have some sway over how the Advisory and Finance Committee works. That is an absolutely legitimate argument.
Okay.
No question about it. And we considered that. And we said, you're absolutely right. That is a significant concern. But we couldn't come up with an alternative.
Right.
What we said instead was, look, we agree. But first of all, you're already talking about 2/5 of this committee, the town moderator and the COPC, being aligned in some fashion as working behind town meeting. So they're independent. You already have 2/5 of this committee. The other 3 bodies are the people that the town are electing as their representatives, as their officials. If you don't trust those people to act in an independent and reasonable fashion, your problem is not with the appointments process, it's with town government.
Right. Right.
So that was the reason that we made that recommendation.
And it does make a lot of sense. Mr. Trifoletti has served for decades and has done an amazing job as the moderator. But someday he's going to retire, and so I can hear the fact that you don't want to have this conflict. So to me, that makes a lot of sense, and hopefully town meeting supports that. We have only a couple minutes left, but there's one quick section I wanted to get to about elections. Is there anything we should know about the proposed changes regarding elections?
Nothing major in terms of the elections, no. We're really leaving things very much the same because we understand how important, and most of our election law is dictated by the state. So
Right.
we're not making changes. Our elections will continue to be nonpartisan. We will still be functioning the same way that we do. The town clerk is still the one responsible for all of these things.
Still appointed, because I know some towns have elected town clerks, but this one stays appointed.
Well, one of the things we got, the Charter Review Committee does not have the authority to recommend changes to elected versus appointed
Gotcha.
or
Okay.
eliminating any elected position. So, for example, the first day the Charter Review Committee came in, the moderator came to speak to us and suggested that we reduce the number of town meeting members. And we had to say, as we were confirmed with
Sure.
council, we don't have the authority to recommend that.
Right, that's right.
That's for a Charter Review Commission only.
Right.
So, again, what we've tried to do with this document is make town government a little bit easier for people to understand, make it more transparent whenever possible, make it more flexible whenever possible in order to be more efficient for the taxpayers. So we tried to clean up the document. It's a legal document.
Right.
And people have made a lot about, removal of general law references. And the reason we did that is because the general laws regularly change. If we have a
Sure.
reference to a general law and that general law changes, our charter is incomplete, is inaccurate.
Right,
So
absolutely.
again, it was an effort to do some cleanup, to make it clearer, to make it more transparent, and hopefully to have things function just a little bit better within the form of government that we have, without any major changes to how people operate.
Well, that is a great way to end. So I was going to ask you to have some closing comments, but that's perfect. That's exactly what I think people need to understand. It's exactly what town meeting members need to know as they head into town meeting on Saturday. It's going to be held at Plymouth North High School. It's going to begin at 8 a.m. with opening ceremonies, moderated by Steve Trifoletti, our longtime moderator. So Steve, thank you for coming today and dispelling the rumors and the misinformation that's out there. I hope folks have a chance to spend the 28 minutes reviewing our conversation and they walk into the town meeting a little more educated than they were prior to this showing. So again, thank you so much for coming, and thank you all for attending this week in Plymouth. If you want more information regarding town meeting, please go to our website at www.plymouth-ma.gov. And for you town meeting members, we will all see you Saturday morning at 8 a.m. October 19th. Thank you.